A little twinge, a little shock, a little whisper at the bottom of your memory. A sudden wind, a gentle knock, and then a rustle in the leaves. You hold your breath, you check the lock, you reassure yourself that's nothing at the window. But you're wondering, you're wondering, you're wondering what that was. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. You turn a key, you flip a switch, you settle back into the blissful unfamiliar. You close your eyes, but there's an itch, a little hurt, your heart retrieves. But you ignore the tiny twitch, pretend the feeling will be gone before the morning. But you're wondering, you're wondering, you're wondering where you are. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. But wouldn't it be fine to share the weather in her eyes, her hair, her footsteps as she climbs the stairs, the shadow in her light? But everything you know is true, and everything you want to do, and everything that makes you you collides against the night. And nothing's black and white. And you're wondering, you're wondering, you're wondering what to do. You're wondering, you're wondering, you're wondering if it's true. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing has to happen.
Welcome to DSM's Black Art Matter series. We're here today with Sinclair Freeman, who is a Dallas-based actor and performer. Welcome, Sinclair.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
As good as can be expected in a pandemic.
That is very true. So we're going to jump on in today with our first question, which we always have for our guest at the top of each episode, and that is, what does Black identity mean to and for you?
For me, being a Black person encompasses a lot of different things, but mostly it's about the rich heritage we have as Black Americans. One thing that I try to carry into everything in my life is having a resilient spirit, and with all of the things that Black Americans have fought for and fought through in our time in America, I feel that resilience has been passed on down, and I try to. That's a huge part of being Black to me.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about how that resilience carries over into your creative life as well? Yeah,
for sure. I think as a performer, we have to get used to hearing no all the time. So and I'm like a sensitive person, like truly, and I don't like being told no. And so sometimes the no's just, for valid reasons, but sometimes no's come for different reasons. Sometimes it's because I've auditioned for Shakespeare things and it wasn't Othello, so I'm not getting considered for the part. And so where resilience comes into play for me is to either keep trying in those avenues where I've been told no, or to create new spaces and new opportunities, or to join up with people who are already doing that.
And then also talking about resilience in a time of a pandemic. So not only is there are these increased calls for racial justice, right, and having resilience to go through that, but then also the resilience to go through and work through what our sector is going through right now. Yeah. How have you as an artist been coping with all of that, and the fact that you're a Black artist in the midst of a pandemic in which our sector is suffering horribly?
Yeah, absolutely. Mostly, truly at the beginning of a pandemic, I was like, I'm about to write something so great. This trauma is going to be so useful, but it was not, and I wrote nothing. So that was terrible, but...
You got to try at least, right?
Right, I tried. I was like, this is it. It didn't happen. So I tried to give myself grace and be like, everybody's having a hard time, and so mostly... I'm taking part of like a virtual theater production right now, and although it's not the same, it scratches the itch, and I'm writing when I can, bit by bit, and just pushing through.
So I want to switch gears here and talk about intersectionality of identities, especially as, creative people and Black individuals. So you yourself are a transgender individual. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been, specifically here in the Dallas art scene, and what that has been like for you?
Absolutely. So I started off actually singing opera, and it was a lot of fun, but about halfway through my opera degree, I realized, A, I probably don't want to do this, and B, I'm trans. Okay. So those were two really big realizations for me, and especially in the world of opera, being a Black performer is already, you're either tokenized or ignored. And so I did have to leave that world behind because I just didn't want to take part of it. But being more in the theater scene in DFW, I was able to take part of shows prior to starting my medical transition. It was like fine, but in the awkward in between phase where, I did not fit the standard or norm of what a man looks like or what a woman looks like. So it made it difficult, I think, for people to cast me. And then, once again, we're adding the layer of Blackness onto that. I'm already not being considered for certain roles automatically, or you've pigeonholed me to one certain role. And so, now I, look the part. And so I'm able to get more roles, but there's still a kind of disgusting feeling when you feel like you're being tokenized. Yeah. And of course, I want representation. I want every role that I deserve. But it's always a hard thing to navigate of like, did they just give this to me so they can look like they're being equitable, or like, did I deserve this?
So several follow-up questions to what you just said. The first, from the very beginning, so when you decided to leave the opera world, you spoke a little bit about, that being a decision based, one, on your trans experience, but also on the Black experience, right?
Oh, yeah.
The combination of those two could not have been easy. Is there one that weighted more in your decision to leave the opera world, or was it just the compounding factors of both that made that difficult choice for you?
It was more, that's hard. I think ultimately it was my trans identity, honestly, because I was a mezzo soprano. So after hormones, I was not, and I did not really have the tools to be an operatic tenor or bass or whatever yet. So I guess I could have done it, but ultimately no. And as far as Blackness goes, the opera world is pretty much just filled with really rich old white people, which is fine. Rich old white people deserve to enjoy art too, right? But it should be for everyone, and the accessibility of the arts is really important to me, and I couldn't see myself making a lifelong career out of something that people like me wouldn't even get to see normally.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then when you were going through your medical transition, did you find that our theater community stepped up in support of you, or did you find that it was a bit difficult to find support in this community?
It was a bit difficult. Yeah. Like, no one was mean or anything, but and people were like personally supportive. Mm-hmm. But when it came to like actually getting cast in shows, I was still auditioning for stuff, mm-hmm. but I was just like not getting the same traction that I get now, and that was difficult.
Yeah. And so the work you do now, you are clearly a champion for equitable rights for Black individuals, trans individuals in this community, and the work that you do is absolutely inspiring. What do you say to this community that has a lot of organizations have come out with statements of, equitable support, and we're going to be here for everyone once we return back to our stages, when that's not what you saw before, and that's not what a lot of us saw before? What are your thoughts after this pandemic ends on not only do we have to face the Black issue, but then on top of that, with your intersecting identities, you then have to face the trans component of that as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait to see the proof, because I love words. I like to write. I like to say words when I act. But unless I see the concrete actions to make those things come to pass, I'm not here for it. And I'm, to be honest, skeptical, because to be a marginalized person is to always hear promises that never come to pass. Yeah. So I'm eager to see if people follow through, but my expectations are low. Yeah.
So I'm gonna flash back here quite a bit.
Okay.
So growing up and experiencing art, what can you describe? What was the moment where you said, "I want to do that"?
Ooh. I was probably around 8 or so. I had always liked to sing, but I wasn't good at it. I really was not. I was not like the kid that was like, "Oh, good voice." No, it was not good. But I kind of started being good at it, and obviously, maybe it's just me, but when I'm better at something, I enjoy doing it more.
That makes sense,
right? Yeah, I don't like to suck at things and keep doing it, but it was such a home for me. Like, honestly, I was like a huge choir nerd. And I was like queer, and like all my friends in choir were queer too. And it was a home for me. My mom did musical theater and opera, and so she had the knowledge to be able to even introduce me to that. Right. And she got me in voice lessons and all of that stuff. And honestly, every voice lesson I ever took, she couldn't pay for that by herself. She's a single parent. Every single one was subsidized by a scholarship. I've never paid full price for a voice lesson. And so I'm grateful to folks that give to scholarships and things like that, because had that not been available, had my mom not had the prior knowledge of the arts, I may have never even known that this was something that I was good at, and something that I enjoyed, and something that brought me so much fulfillment. Yeah.
So it sounds like the reason I asked this question is, I've interviewed a lot of individuals on this series where they never saw someone like them on the stage, which always seemed to be a deterrent, and they had to push through that. So I'm wondering, you had your mom who had prior experience in this sector, who could say, here's how it works, here's what to do, here's what you should be doing. Did you have experiences though where you saw individuals like yourself on stage, or did you have to fight to find those spaces?
Very rarely.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the Arlington area, so we would go to Jubilee Theater sometimes, and so that was amazing, and it's always good to see yourself on stage in that arena. But sometimes we went to the opera too, like we would win tickets and stuff. And I remember we saw, I think it was the Fort Worth Opera's production of Little Women years ago. It was really beautiful. And there was one Black person in it. And we stayed afterwards to meet him, because it's just so rare to be able to look and see that. Even in movies, like we have a cast and it's all white people. The world doesn't even look like that. Even if you're racist, I'm stealing from John Boyega, but he said, even if you're racist, you have to go out into the world and see people that look different from you. And so honestly, like, I'm disgusted when I still see movies and it's all white people. I'm not watching it. You can't have my money.
Yeah. Good for you. So I'm curious, when you saw that production of Little Women at the Fort Worth Opera, and you met that performer afterwards, what was that conversation like? Was it more of just like a great show, I loved you, or did you delve a little bit deeper when you were talking to them?
I mean, for me, I was a kid, so I was like, amazing. But my mom was like, you're Black and you're performing. Tell me about this. Tell my child about this. And so he talked to me about it. And I'm really grateful. I wish I could remember his name. He was very kind. But he basically gave me the gist of like, it's the classic Black parent or Black elder speech. You will have to work 2 times as hard to receive half the recognition of your white peers. And like, I wish that weren't a true thing, but I know it to be. Yeah. I've seen it in action. When I was in college, my white girlfriend at the time got opportunities that I did not, and our voices were comparable. And I'll leave it there. Yeah.
So when that performer told you that and gave you that speech, is there something that clicked in your head at that moment saying, okay, I should prepare myself for this, even though you were a kid, or did that moment come later? Yeah,
no, it did not click. I was just like, okay, this was cool. I like Little Women. That's a good book. So no, it did not click. I think I was probably in high school when it really started to click in for me, because that's when I started like really pursuing art as like a craft, I guess. And I saw the opportunities that my white classmates got, and I saw the roles that I was immediately expected to play. And at the time, my solution was just going to be like, well, I'm just going to work harder than literally every single person, and that way it will be undeniable that I deserve X, Y, or Z. Right. But sometimes it still doesn't work. Sometimes like people still think you're like lazy, or still think you are not doing the right thing if you mess up one time because you're a child. And I found it to be very frustrating. And I was like one of the only Black people there. So I just tried to keep my head down and work really hard. I was the big choir nerd. I did all-state choir and all that stuff, and it brought me a lot of joy, but it was not without a lot of like bullshit to wade through.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to ask you about something that you touched on earlier, and it's this topic of trauma, right? Yeah. So you spoke a little bit about, we're in a pandemic right now. There's some trauma that's just naturally coming from that. Yeah. But being a Black creative, being a Black trans creative, I'm sure you have experienced lots of other different traumas through your life up until this point. How has that trauma informed your creativity or informed the type of work that you've wanted to be a part of or put out into the world?
Yeah, I guess another intersectional identity that I hold is like, I'm not rich, right? And poverty is a huge thing that plays into opportunity and accessibility. And for me, that has been a huge barrier, and especially when I did opera, because that's something where you have to invest a lot in the front before you can get anywhere. If you want to go do summer programs, and I think that applies with most theater things. Like there's a lot of things that my classmates were able to do, and like even now there are things that other people are able to do because they have the capital or they have the connections that wealth brings, and I simply can't do that. I have to like walk into the place raw and hope that I can like charm them into being like, no, just literally give me a chance. And the way that trauma and that informs me is that my goal is to, I don't want to buy into the whole capitalist society, but that's where we are. Yeah. And I want to eventually be wealthy enough to, have fuck you money, and to also be able to partner with other organizations that are bringing accessibility and the arts to kids that would never that would not be reached otherwise. Because it makes me sick to think about all of the talent we have in our community that we literally don't know about because they didn't grow up white and didn't grow up in the right neighborhood or things like that.
Yeah. So I'm so glad you bring up this topic of, accessibility through money, basically.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to a lot of Black artists where they have been expected to either work for free and expose that trauma for free on the stage or through that work, or for pennies on the dollar of what they're worth, right?
Yeah.
What is your response to organizations who call upon you and call upon your talents and say, oh, by the way, but can you do this for free as a favor to us?
No.
And how easy or hard is that to say? And how have you gotten to the point to be able to say that?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, when I was like 18 or whatever, I'd be like, okay. But I mean, as I got older, no, I don't work for free. I don't. I worked hard to have to develop the talent that I have, and you're going to pay me for it. And it sounds maybe like asshole-ish or cocky. I don't mean it that way. I mean, I'm providing you a service and you have to pay for it.
Well, I'm curious about what you just said of it sounding assholey or cockish, because when we associate white individuals saying that same thing, we do not describe it that way.
Yes.
So I'm interested why you... Is that just how it's been perceived when you've said it?
Yes. Yeah. I've had people be like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I'm not asking for you to pay me like $1,000 for a minute of song. Can you give me a stipend?
That'd be great, though.
I mean, I'll accept it if anyone wants to, but I'm literally asking for the bare minimum. So yeah, no, it has been people have bristled when I've said it before, and that's fine.
Yeah. Have you found that your artistic career has suffered because of that, or have you gained more respect because of it?
I feel like it's the latter.
Okay.
Because I think people know, don't ask him to do something unless you gotta offer something. If and sometimes I might be like, no, that's okay. It's not often because I need money. But sometimes you just have to offer. Right. You have to offer to pay me. It's a service.
So we've touched on a lot of great topics today. The topic I kind of want to end on here in our conversation is this idea that we hear all the time in our sector of, well, we just can't get this group to show up, right? So I want to kind of broach this topic in two different ways with you. The first one being when organizations say we just can't get Black people to show up. How do you feel about that? But then the whole other side of this is when organizations are doing shows that involve trans characters and they say, well, we just can't get trans individuals to show up. What is your response to that?
Stop being lazy. Truly, that's it. There's no lack of Black people in the world, in our state, in the city. We're here. And so to me, that is just really trying to shift blame and be like, they're not coming. No, bitch, go get them. We're here. And so it's the same as with trans people. Now, for trans actors, it's a little bit harder to find people, honestly. It is. Especially for musicals and things. But it takes more work. And I think if you want to take on telling Black stories or trans stories or stories that involve Black or trans people, then just no, we'll have to work a little bit harder. Yeah. And I don't think that's something to be afraid of. And if you feel afraid, then ask someone to help you. Yeah. I'm happy to help organizations find the other trans people. You have to pay me, but I'll help you. Yeah. And the same with it's definitely easier with Black people because we're literally everywhere. Right. So there's really not any sort of excuse that's acceptable to me for that.
So I'm curious as well on your opinion of organizations who do shows that involve trans experiences but cast individuals who have not lived those experiences and use the excuse, well, you can't tell from the outside. What is your opinion of that? And how do you react to that?
That's despicable.
And I wish I could say I've never heard that, but
yeah,
we've heard it.
We have, yeah. No, it's despicable. It's lazy and it's disrespectful. Mm-hmm. I know it's acting. I know it's all playing pretend, but at least for me, acting has to come from a place of truth. That's why I try to be honest all the time. That's why honesty is super important to me, because it has to come from something you have an inkling about.
Right.
And being gay is not the same as being trans, even. Like being queer is not the same as being trans. It's such a drastic and wild experience that, like, if you want it to be done well, you are robbing your audience and your company by not casting a trans person.
And then who do you think the responsibility falls on for ensuring that equitable representation? Is it the theater companies, or is it the actors themselves saying, no, I will not accept this role because I can't accurately portray that role?
Yeah, I think it should first be the theaters, because y'all should have the sense there's a whole group of people be able to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this. But it would help if they had already had like trans or gender not conforming people on their staff, because someone would be able to say no.
Right.
But if you don't have that, then it is my hope that actors have like the honor to be able to say, no, thank you for offering that, or like, don't audition, eh? But if someone's like, come play this role that you should not play, sorry, no, I can't do that. Just like you wouldn't like accept a role in blackface.
Right, exactly.
Because that's clearly and obviously wrong.
Right.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing all of the insight you've shared with us today.
Yeah.
My final question here for you is, for everyone watching this episode today, and especially for those little Black and brown children who might be watching this at some point and looking at you and saying, I want to be that brave. I want to be that person that can stand up for myself in the future and face the adversities that you have faced and get through it. What advice do you have for those young people?
My advice is to rely on your community to uplift you, but also any opportunity you have to find joy, to take that, because the world is going to be full of bullshit and terrible things that are going to make you sad. So whenever you see those moments of joy, grasp them, hold on to them, and use them to sustain you in whatever you create.
Well, Sinclair, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it on behalf of myself and DSM. Thank you for sharing your time and talents with us. It was a great time talking to you today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.